Hello there. I want to talk to you about the sharpening technique that I teach, what it is, and why I teach it. The first thing that I would like to say is that this is not my technique. In other words, I did not invent this. This is a technique I learned as a child. It's an old school technique. It's probably the most basic way to learn to sharpen that I can think of, and which is the reason that I teach it. If I thought that there was something that could more easily and simply teach you the fundamentals of sharpening, then I would teach that instead. But if the truth was told, there's nobody that can claim that they invented a sharpening technique. For example, and I'm not slamming him, there are people that can't stand him and hate him, and then there are people that find value in the things that he does, and there are other people, excuse me, let me straighten that out. There are other people that, who don't care either way, and I don't, okay, so... But I'm not downing him. But there's a guy called Murray Carter, and he teaches an edge trailing technique. And I don't know if he calls it this, but a lot of people call it the Murray Carter sharpening technique. And I'm sorry, I hate to tell you, but if you look in the old books and you look back through history and stuff like that, people were sharpening that way a long time before Murray Carter was born. Okay, the techniques for sharpening, there's not anything new. Sorry. Nobody in the modern age has invented anything when it comes to freehand sharpening. Okay, we all borrow from the old folks that have passed on before us. Most of the people that have taught these techniques have been long dead and buried. Okay, so this is not my technique. It doesn't belong to me. This is the way I was taught, and I have used other techniques before, but I always come back to this. And this technique is the closest thing I can find to taking you by the hand and teaching you how to sharpen. This is the most dead simple way. So before we get into the technique that I use, I want to talk about some geometry terms when it comes to knives. And the terms that I use are going to be similar to what other people use, but I am not. This is my terminology, and if it differs with someone else's, doesn't matter to the learning process. All I'm trying to do is present this to you in the simplest way possible. And if you take like a knife blade, the profile of one, and I know I suck at this, but if you look at the profile of the blade, what we're interested in is the bevel, and more particularly the bevel angle and the apex, where these two different bevels meet. Okay? The idea for sharpening, and if you have this, you have sharp. If you don't have this, you don't have sharp. It doesn't matter the technique you use to get there. These are the very basic fundamentals that you have to have in order to get sharp. Okay? These bevel flats, or the bevel, okay, you're going to want to sharpen that bevel at the same exact angle every time, so that both of these bevels meet in the center, right here at the tip, at what's called the apex, at as fine of a point as you can possibly get. Okay? Doesn't matter how you get to that point, but that's what you're looking for. And what my method does, the way I teach it, this is my method. Let me move this. You would take the knife and lay it on the stone. Find your bevel angle and come forward on the stone. Then you would lift up. Find the bevel angle. Remember I always said, take your time, don't get in a hurry. When you're first learning, you're going to want to lay that knife on the stone. Find that bevel. Come down the stone. Pick it up. Lay it on the stone. Find that bevel angle. And bring it down. And what you're doing in the method I teach is you're honing this bevel flat until you've ground so much steel off of this flat. You've maintained the same angle, and you've ground all the steel that you can grind off of this flat before the steel doesn't have anywhere to go. Let's make a new blade profile so you can see. So you've ground this flat to a point where the steel has nowhere else to go but to roll over, so that you've created a burr. So you can't refine this side of that bevel, or that apex rather, this fine point, any further. The steel's rolling over the apex. Get me? Then you flip the blade over, you find that angle and move forward, bring it back, find that angle and move it forward continuously until you've ground as much steel as possible off of this bevel angle and the steel has rolled over like that, and you flip this burr from here to here. At this point, your apex is as perfect as you can possibly get it. You don't realize that because you have that burr there. So at this point, what you would do is on the same stone, you begin to do alternating strokes, finding that bevel angle each time. And what you're doing is you're moving this burr from this side to 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 this side over and over and over until, just like if you were to take a coat hanger and bend it, eventually that burr will pop off of the edge. And at that point, let me see, okay, at that point, you have an absolutely perfect apex. It's absolutely pristine. It's absolutely as fine as you possibly can get it. Okay? And then at that point, you would move to a finer stone if you desired refinement. And using alternating strokes, finding that bevel angle each and every time, until you polished the entirety of this bevel and this bevel to the desired fineness or polish that you want. Now you don't have to create another bevel or another burr each time, because this initial burr that you created and removed from that apex has formed that apex perfectly. Okay. So there's no need in taking any more steel off of this than you have to and creating a burr, another burr. You're just polishing this until it's at the refinement level that you want. That's my technique in a nutshell. Now, why do I believe that this is the most basic and the perfect way to teach a beginner or someone who's tried to learn to sharpen without success? There's a lot of different ways you could learn. But when I'm presenting this blade to the stone, and I'm finding that angle, and I'm bringing that blade across, and I'm coming back, and I'm finding that angle, and I'm bringing that blade across, okay, till I have that burr. And then I'm flipping it over and doing the same thing. What's happening is I am building a muscle memory for the way I hold that knife, so that my body remembers that angle. Okay? And when I flip it over this way, my body remembers that angle. And so it becomes locked into muscle memory. And I can maintain that angle very easily over time. Another benefit to it is that if I want a little steeper angle or a little more shallow angle, then I can adjust my hand, and my body has learned, my hands have learned how to hold an angle. It doesn't matter what that angle is. I can choose whatever I want, but my body has learned to maintain angles with a knife on a stone. Okay, that's one. So I've got muscle memory. All right. Now, I've also learned how to make that apex perfect, and how to tell if it's perfect, because I got to tell it's called that burr, so I know when it's right. So now, when I move to a finer stone, and first of all, it takes the guesswork out of it. I know whether that's right or not. That's one. But when I move to a finer stone, inevitably, when I first start learning, what's going to happen is I'm not going to, when I move, maybe my body positioning moves a little bit or something like that, and I'll begin to try to refine that bevel. But I'll get the blade tilted just a little bit that way or just a little bit this way. And if I tilt it this way, what will happen is when I go to the finer stone, the knife will dull. Why? Because instead, this will be all right. Instead of honing like that, I will actually kind of hone like that. And I'm cutting off the tip of my apex and dulling it. Okay? And since the stone is finer, even if I do the same thing this way, it'll take more time to bring that apex back to where it was at this different angle, and I will most likely not spend that kind of time because the coarser stone took a shorter amount of time, and I'm learning. I don't know. Okay, so I can easily find out what's going on, because the other thing that can happen, if I tilt the blade this way instead of that way, then what's happening, and I'm just going to draw the bevel and the apex, is that I'm honing like this, and I'm missing that. So now, how do I know what's happening? Well, if I look at this under the loop, what I'll see is this area and this area. That'll be nice and shiny, but back here, the scratches will be more heavy and it'll be duller. So I know, okay, I'm polishing here and I'm not polishing there. Conversely, this will be more polished and this corner will be kind of rounded. But this section right here will be dull and not the same type of shine or sheen. And so I'll know immediately by looking at that through a loop what's going on. So this method not only teaches me muscle memory, how to maintain an angle, whatever angle I want. How to make sure that my apex is perfect. Now you can also use a loop and look at your apex. I encourage that as well. And you can tell that way too. Okay, but I know that. I know how to maintain an angle. I know how to apex the edge. In other words, to refine this apex to a perfect point. And I've learned how to diagnose common problems when it comes to sharpening and honing. And so there's a lot of different methods that you could learn that in that way, but this is the most dead simple, because that repeated pattern. You've got that wrist locked in that position, and your muscle memory will kick in. You'll remember that, and you'll remember how your hand has to be going this way quickly. Okay? And you'll get repeatable results, because if you always hone this side of the blade until you get a burr from here to here, and then flip it over and hone till you get a burr from here to here, your apex is perfect. There's no way that it can't be. Okay? And then repeated passes on that stone will pop that burr off, and you can refine the edge. And so that's why I teach it, because it's a really simple and a really easy way to learn the muscle memory that you need and the basic fundamentals that you need to reach sharp. And you can maintain that technique the rest of your life if you want to. A lot of people would call this a beginner technique, but what I have come to find is that most professionals reach a point in whatever it is that they're doing that they cut things down to the very basics of what it is to get the most repeatable and fastest way of doing something. This is the most repeatable way to reach sharp. So you can call it a beginner technique and say all the other techniques are more advanced if you want to. Those are just words. They really are. This is a viable technique that was taught over and over and over and over through decades and decades and decades to millions of people. And it was taught for a reason. It flipping works. And it works pretty much every time if you follow it. And if you run into problems, you can diagnose those problems and fix them every flipping time. So that's what my method is and why I teach it. And if you've got a better method, then start yourself a YouTube channel and teach that. As for me, this is what I will continue to teach, because for me, I believe it's the very easiest way for me to teach someone who cannot sharpen a knife how to do it over and over and over and over and over and over again with success. All right, bless you, and I'll talk to you later.